An Arab billionaire purchases a single mother at an auction to have a child, but what he uncovers afterward leaves him stunned. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching? Enjoy the story, everyone. Layla was a young woman carrying the weight of 1,000 problems on her back, doing everything she could for her little boy, Ayman. With nowhere else to turn, she chose the unthinkable, an illicit auction where women were paraded like possessions and their company bought by wealthy, powerful men. For Layla, it wasn't a choice. It was the last remaining door. Hunched in a shadowed corner of the opulent hall, she felt the crushing force of every decision that had pushed her here. Her heart pounded unevenly, each beat steeped in fear and uncertainty about whatever waited on the other side of this night. She kept seeing Ayman's face, her son tucked in with their elderly neighbor for the evening. Overdue bills, a looming eviction, and too many nights when Ayman had fallen asleep hungry had driven her to step over a line she never thought she would cross. The event's organizer, impeccably suited, smile fixed and hollow, approached to deliver instructions. "Remember, Layla, keep your composure, smile, and don't meet the guests' eyes," he murmured before gliding away. The room overflowed with men in tailored elegance, examining each woman with the cool detachment of collectors surveying rare art. Layla's throat tightened when her name was called. "Lot number 23, the organizer announced in a theatrical, calculated tone. Her legs trembled as she climbed into the glare of the stage. The lights burned hot and blinding. Sweat gathered at her hairline under the heat of the spotlights. She lifted her chin, but the predatory stares crawled across her skin all the same. A truly exotic beauty, the organizer purred, adjectives that made Layla feel stripped of even her last layer of dignity. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd, then a deep, commanding voice sliced through the noise. $1 million. Silence crashed over the hall. Heads turned toward a man in the back row, tanned skin, eyes like sharpened steel, an aura that bent the room toward him. Karim Al-Fayed, an Arab magnate famed for obscene wealth and iron discretion, had spoken. The organizer, startled by such an opening bid, repeated the number to be sure. No counteroffer came. "Sold," he declared, smiling as if he'd orchestrated destiny. Layla's knees weakened, but she willed herself steady as she stepped down. In a single, ruthless stroke, her life had been rewritten. Karim approached, face unreadable, gaze level. "We need to discuss the terms," he said evenly, extending a hand to guide her. Layla hesitated, then followed him into a private room, where whatever fate she'd accepted on stage would be put in ink. The room was vast and restrained, quiet luxury. Karim motioned toward an armchair. From a side table, he retrieved a thick envelope prepared in advance. "Here's the contract," he said, handing it to her. "Read carefully." Her fingers shook as she unfolded the pages. The silence grew thunderous as she skimmed the first clauses. Her breath snagged when she reached the heart of it. "You want me to have a child and then leave it with you?" she asked, voice thin and shaking. Karim folded his arms and nodded. "I need an heir. After the birth, you leave." "It states that very clearly." Layla surged to her feet as indignation burned through her fear. "I can't do this. I won't abandon my child." His eyes narrowed, voice steady as stone. "You knew what this was when you stepped into that hall. Regret isn't part of the arrangement." "This is inhumane," Layla shot back, clutching the contract. "You think you can buy a baby and discard the mother?" Karim stepped closer, presence filling the room. "I paid $1 million, Layla. That wasn't impulse. You don't have a choice anymore." Her pulse thundered. She could see the trap from every angle and none of the exits. Karim set a pen on the table between them. "Sign. When the child is born, you'll receive the money and you'll be free to live your life." Layla stared at the pages, anger and despair churning in her hands. She pictured Ayman and the brutal sacrifice she was making to safeguard his future. Tears gathered, but she fought them back. "This isn't right," she whispered, sinking into the chair. Karim leaned in, gaze unblinking. "Right and wrong won't change what happens next. The agreement will." There was no door that didn't lock behind her. With a heart that felt heavier than her body, she lifted the pen and signed her name. Kareem took the document. Good. Tomorrow morning we'll do the medical exams. After that, you'll come to my estate. Rest now. He left her with the rustle of paper and the sound of her own breath. She looked down at the signature that had sealed her fate. The next morning, a limousine idled outside her cramped building. Saying goodbye to Eamon was swift and raw. She told him she had work far away for a little while, promised calls whenever she could. He waved with an easy smile, innocent, unaware of the cost his mother was paying. The drive to the estate was wrapped in silence. Layla watched the city melt into desert, then reassemble itself as glass, steel, and immaculate stone. When the iron gates parted, she saw manicured gardens spread like a painting, and a mansion that looked invented by a dream. Kareem stood at the entrance, expression still and formal. He led her inside, pointed out rooms and rules with clipped clarity. Your privacy will be respected, but I expect you to meet your obligations without question, he said, leaving her with a staff member named Amira. Amira, kind, middle-aged, guided Layla to a serene room awash in soft tones and quiet luxury, the opposite of the austere life she had known. Clothes and accessories were laid out on the bed. If you need anything, I'm nearby, Amira said with a gentle smile. Layla thanked her, feeling like a visitor in a museum where everything was beautiful and nothing belonged to her. That night, she stood on the balcony, watching the horizon blush and fade, wondering what Eamon was doing at that exact moment. The ache of distance pressed down until her chest hurt, but she clung to one thought, that this would secure his future. A soft knock broke the silence. Kareem appeared. Tomorrow we'll see my physician, he said, then left as simply as he came. Layla nodded, mute. The weight of her decision deepened with every hour, and there was no path back. She rose early in the hushed mansion. A sleepless night had left her hollow despite the silk and softness. Amira arrived to escort her through corridors lined with Persian rugs, past gilded frames and towering windows that framed the immaculate grounds. The limousine whisked them to a clinic in the heart of Dubai. Dr. Ibrahim, a calm, measured presence, conducted the examinations and declared her ready for the fertilization process. Layla nodded, face composed, while unease rippled underneath. Kareem kept his distance, present, controlled, treating the procedure like another item on a list. For him, it was responsibility. For Layla, it was the threshold of a grief she could already feel. 9 months to love a child she'd have to leave behind. Back at the estate, she wandered to distract herself. Everywhere she turned was excess. Floor-to-ceiling books in a hushed library, an indoor pool embraced by marble columns, a music room with instruments from far-flung places. The splendor couldn't fill the quiet. It felt like a palace built over an empty space. She noticed that Kareem, surrounded by beauty, seemed profoundly alone. Smiles were rare, courtesies efficient and cool. In those early days, their conversations were purely logistical. He ensured the contract's terms were followed and avoided anything that wasn't necessary. Layla felt like a ghost given a schedule. At night, she stared at the ceiling, replaying Ayman's laugh in her head. Morning came, then another, until a formal dinner required her presence. She was instructed to dress elegantly and accompany Kareem as stipulated. The gown was breathtaking. Her steps were uncertain on the sweeping staircase. Guests watched with curiosity. A few polite greetings, a few cool appraisals that made her feel naked. Kareem stayed close, introducing her as my special guest. You all right? He asked quietly when they found a pocket of calm. I'm trying, she admitted. He nodded, unreadable again. For him, these gatherings were duty dressed up as glamour. For her, it was immersion in a language she didn't speak. That night, back in her room, she called the neighbor. Ayman's cheerful voice soothed and shattered her at once. Tears came hot and fast after she hung up. Days edged forward, and Layla began seeing hairline cracks in Kareem's marble poise. Meticulous, demanding, yes, but every so often a human warmth flickered through. One afternoon, she found him in the garden, watering a rare plant with his own hands. It was my mother's, he said when he noticed her. She used to say caring for it brings peace. Empathy stabbed through Layla's resolve. For the first time, Kareem looked less like a figurehead and more like a man managing old pain. Their burdens were different. but both were heavy. Amira started sharing more too. In long, quiet afternoons, she told Layla how Kareem had stepped into responsibility early, parents gone, expectations cementing around him like wet concrete. The stories complicated his silhouette, softened the edges. Still, Layla kept her distance from attachment. This was temporary. Gardens and stars became her rituals, the small places where she could breathe. One evening, a knock. Kareem entered with a softened posture. "We need to talk," he said, and Layla braced for rules or reminders. Instead, he hesitated, as if translating something delicate. "I know this is difficult for you," he began. "I won't make it harder. I want you to know. I respect your courage." The words startled her. For a heartbeat, she saw something raw in his eyes, vulnerability. It was brief, but it lodged in her. Maybe the cold was a shell. Maybe the man inside wasn't made of ice after all. When he left, she turned the moment over like a coin in her palm. For the first time since arriving, possibility slipped into the room. Life at the estate settled into a rhythm. The garden became her sanctuary, the sun on her skin, the music of water. Kareem often crossed that same refuge. He didn't initiate, but she felt his awareness of her, the charged quiet neither acknowledged. One afternoon, she found him pruning with precise care. He sensed her and flicked a glance, then returned to the shears, signaling he wasn't inviting conversation. "Do you enjoy gardening?" she ventured. "It organizes my thoughts," he said without looking up. A small opening. He was guarded, not impenetrable. She respected the perimeter and stayed curious. That evening, he joined her for dinner, an unexpected shift. Until then, meals had been solitary, served discreetly. His presence changed the air. "Are you adjusting?" he asked, pouring wine. "As much as I can," she answered, steadying her voice. He studied her, as if trying to read a language without a key. "I know this isn't easy. I hope you understand it's necessary." Necessary for whom? She wondered, but swallowed the question. Beneath the steel, she could sense something carried and concealed. Weeks slipped by, and Kareem's quiet gestures began to surface. After she mentioned missing certain foods from home, Amira appeared with a tray of dishes from Layla's childhood. "Mr. Kareem asked me to prepare these," Amira said with a smile. Layla was caught off guard. His contradictions multiplied, formal and distant, but attentive in ways that left warmth in their wake. Another morning, a stack of books appeared by her bed, authors she'd named in passing, stories she loved. He noticed the smallest threads. A turning point came in the music room. The door stood ajar, and a gentle piano line drifted into the corridor. Layla stepped in and found Kareem at the instrument, playing with unexpected grace. "You play?" she asked, genuinely surprised. He looked up, startled in the intimacy of being witnessed. "My mother taught me," he said, withdrawing his hands. "It's beautiful," Layla murmured, moving closer. He averted his gaze, disarmed by praise. Under the armor there was a man stitched to his past by melody. Another day, a small bird fell from a branch in the garden. Layla scooped it up, fragile heartbeat buzz-soft in her palms. Kareem appeared curious. "What will you do?" "I'll care for it until it can fly," she said. He said nothing, but something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Compassion, it seemed, could move him. Nights remained lonely, but the mansion's quiet became less hostile as she walked its corridors and let the architecture wash over her. One evening they crossed paths. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much in my head," she admitted. He nodded, understanding threaded through the gesture, and invited her for tea in the library. Surrounded by shelves and soft lamplight, they spoke longer than ever before. Layla felt the mask slip, as if she were meeting the real man in the shadows between words. The staff noticed too. Amira's kindness deepened into friendship. Kareem seemed more at ease in Layla's presence, formality tempered by a new warmth. For Layla, isolation receded to the edges. Despite the contract, she was finding moments of meaning stitched into the opulence. Yet the reality never left the room. Each dawn brought her closer to carrying a child she might not be allowed to keep. As the first signs of change colored their dynamic, she braced herself for what would come next. Kareem was a labyrinth. She was only beginning to map its turns. Their paths were tangling in ways neither had intended. Days passed. She noticed Kareem watching children with a softness that surprised her during a charity visit he sponsored. "I see the future in them. Something you must nurture with love and responsibility," he said quietly. The admission moved Layla. There were still layers she hadn't reached. Let's play a game for those who only read comments. Type McDonald's. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now back to the story. Small gestures multiplied. Kareem asked about her favorite things. She found subtle ways to thank him. They fell into a ritual. Talks in the garden, evenings in the library, swapping books and stories. One night he asked, "If you could change one thing about your past, what would it be?" Layla thought, then answered, "I'd choose more wisely whom to trust, but I wouldn't undo everything. Without the wrong turns, I wouldn't have Ayman." His name hovered between them like a fragile note. Kareem felt the weight and gently guided the conversation elsewhere, giving her room. Despite their growing ease, Layla could see the wall in front of them. The contract was immovable, counting down the months. No matter how much she began to care, the exit remained etched in ink. Another night under starlight, Kareem joined her on the balcony. They sat in companionable silence until he asked, "You think about the future a lot, don't you?" "I can't help it," she said. "All of this feels temporary." He turned, meeting her eyes with a force that stole her breath. "The future gets built, Layla. It depends on how we handle the present." The words warmed something she'd kept cold on purpose. There was an unspoken promise there, a willingness to shape destiny rather than inherit it. The mansion felt lighter. Amira was pleased. Kareem seemed less isolated. Layla felt pieces of herself clicking back into place. Still, she knew a crossroads approached. Feelings were dangerous inside a cage. Morning brought restlessness. The secret of Ayman strained in her chest. Hiding it had been a shield. Now it felt like a wedge. After breakfast, she walked the gardens to clear her mind until Amira called her back, voice urgent. Layla hurried inside. Kareem stood in the living room holding a photograph. His expression was unreadable, but tension coiled through his voice. "Who is this boy?" Layla froze. The picture Ayman, one of the few she'd brought and hidden so carefully. Somehow he'd found it. "He's my son," she said, voice trembling. Silence pressed down. Kareem moved toward her, eyes locked onto hers. "You lied," he said softly, the softness colder than a shout. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears threatened. Layla forced herself upright. "I was afraid it would complicate everything, that you'd decide I wasn't fit for the agreement." He folded his arms, weighing her. "And why agree at all, knowing you'd leave another child behind?" The question hit like a blow. Layla inhaled shakily. "I did it for him, for the bills, the rent, the nights he went hungry. I had no choice." Kareem turned to the window, staring past his reflection. "You should have trusted me," he said at last. The disappointment in his voice carved into her. The truth was out, and the fragile bridge between them trembled. That night he summoned her to the library. The lamplight made the room intimate. The tension made it small. He sat in his usual chair, a folder on the table. "I reviewed the contract," he said. "It doesn't cover secrets like this. It also doesn't say what to do now." Panic surged. "Please don't send me away. I'll keep my word." He lifted a hand. "I'm not sending you anywhere. But trust is essential, Layla. We'll have to rebuild it." He slid a page toward her. "I want you to see Ayman. You may visit him, on one condition. He can't know the truth about our arrangement, not yet." Layla blinked, stunned. Relief and guilt collided. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without answers," he said, hands folded. "Your son should have some part of you, even if it's temporary." His words carried an old hurt. For the first time, she understood that he wasn't just a man buying an heir. He was a man bound up in unanswered questions of his own. The next day, Layla was driven to see Ayman. The miles fell away like years. When he saw her, he flew into her arms, and she held on as if she could stop time. "Mommy, you're back," he laughed. Joy scalded with sorrow. It was a day of games and stories, of stealing back ordinary moments. Dusk arrived too soon. He hugged her hard. "When will you come again?" "Soon," she promised, knowing how thin the word was. Back at the mansion, she was wrung out. Kareem waited in the living room, calm but concerned. "How is he?" he asked. "He's happy," she said, sinking into a sofa. "It's hard to leave." He nodded. No speech, just a look that said he understood something words can't carry. In the days that followed, their dynamic shifted. Quiet understanding began to replace tension. Kareem was more considerate. Layla allowed herself to trust a little. Shared meals meant more. Walks meant more. One evening, he opened a door he'd kept locked. "My mother died when I was young," he said. "My father was distant. Business first, always. Responsibility came before I knew what it meant." "That must have been hard," Layla said. "It was. It made me who I am, and still I can't shake the feeling that something is missing." She wanted to reach across the space and touch his hand. Even with his walls, the moment brought them closer. Months moved on, reshaping what had begun as a cold exchange into something with respect and admiration woven through it. Layla saw more than a powerful man. She saw a man capable of startling gentleness. Kareem saw in Layla a strength and compassion he hadn't expected. They both knew time was still ticking, but the future no longer looked like a locked door. Days blurred into weeks, and something unspoken began to grow between them. Delicate, hesitant, yet undeniable. Kareem's cold demeanor softened. Layla's guardedness melted in the quiet spaces they shared. A single glance during breakfast lingered longer than it should have. A silence at dinner brimmed with things neither dared to say aloud. Then one night during a violent desert storm, everything changed. Thunder split the sky open. Wind howled through the corridors like a chorus of ghosts. Layla couldn't sleep. She stepped out of her room barefoot, drawn by the pulse of rain against the glass. In the grand hall, lightning flashed, and there he was, standing near the window, watching the storm in silence. "You can't sleep either," she asked softly. He turned, eyes glinting under the silver light. "Storms remind me of my childhood," he said. "They make everything else feel small." Layla approached, the echo of her steps swallowed by thunder. "Sometimes small is a relief," she murmured. Kareem's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. "You're not afraid?" "I've seen worse storms," she said, meeting his gaze. A pause stretched between them, long and charged. The air felt heavy, alive. For a moment, the world outside vanished. There was only the storm inside the room, reflected in their eyes. Without planning it, without thought, he stepped closer. She didn't move away. The distance collapsed, and before either could speak, his hand brushed her cheek, a hesitant, questioning gesture. She didn't flinch. The silence broke in a way words never could. What followed wasn't madness, it was surrender. Two souls colliding not out of passion alone, but out of the unbearable need to be seen. When the storm finally passed, dawn found them still together, the first light spilling gently across tangled sheets and quiet breathing. For the first time in years, Kareem looked at peace, and Layla, despite the contract that chained her fate, felt something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. But hope is fragile when built on forbidden ground. Over the following days, they moved through the mansion as if nothing had changed. But every glance, every accidental brush of fingers, betrayed the truth. Kareem avoided speaking of that night. Layla didn't dare ask what it meant. Until one evening she found him on the terrace, staring into the horizon, jaw tight with conflict. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know what to call it," he admitted. "You complicate everything I've built my life around." Layla's voice trembled. "And you've become everything I never meant to need." Their eyes met, and something inside both of them gave way. The following weeks felt different, gentler, yet heavier. Kareem began spending more time near her, under the guise of concern for her well-being. He attended medical appointments, asked about her health, left small gestures of care she didn't know how to receive. But outside the mansion walls, whispers began to stir. In high society, secrets had short lives. A powerful man purchasing a woman and then keeping her hidden, someone was bound to question. One morning, Kareem entered her room holding a newspaper. "They're starting to talk," he said. On the front page, a headline: "Mysterious woman living with billionaire Al Fayed. Who is she?" Layla's stomach twisted. What happens now? I'll handle it, he said curtly, but there was something in his eyes. Fear, not for reputation, but for her. Security was doubled. Her walks were restricted. The mansion, once a gilded prison, became a fortress. Days later, Layla fainted during a routine checkup. When she awoke, Dr. Ibrahim smiled. Congratulations, you're pregnant. The words felt surreal. Layla pressed her palms against her belly, eyes flooding. Kareem, standing nearby, froze, then exhaled deeply, a rare, vulnerable crack in his armor. That's good news, he managed. She nodded, unable to speak. The child that had begun as a contract was now the pulse of her heart. From that day forward, everything changed. Kareem's protectiveness intensified. He ensured the best care, the best food, the best comfort, but it wasn't duty anymore. It was something closer to devotion. He was there for every appointment, every scare, every quiet night when fear crept in. Layla began to see the man behind the title, a man terrified of losing what he never thought he could have. One evening, she found him sitting beside the cradle that had been set up in the nursery, staring at it as though trying to see the future. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I don't deserve this," he said softly. "Maybe it's not about deserving," she replied. "Maybe it's about finally allowing yourself to be human." He looked at her, eyes glassy with something she hadn't seen before, tenderness. As her belly grew, so did their bond. They shared laughter, stories, dreams that neither had dared speak before. Kareem began to smile more. Layla began to trust more. But happiness, like a mirage, is often fleeting. One afternoon, Layla overheard a conversation between Kareem and one of his advisors. "If the press learns the child's origins, it will destroy your legacy," the man warned. Kareem's reply was cold. "Then they'll never learn the truth." Layla froze behind the door, heart pounding. The words should have comforted her, but instead they filled her with dread. Because if he could lie to the world so easily, what would stop him from lying to her? That night, she confronted him. "Would you really hide our child?" He exhaled sharply. "I'm protecting what's mine." "What's yours?" she repeated, wounded. "You think that's what this is? Ownership?" He stepped closer, anger flaring. "You knew what this arrangement was, Layla." Her voice broke, and you know it's not that anymore. The silence that followed was like a blade between them. Kareem turned away, fists tight. "You don't understand what it means to have the world watching your every move." "No," she said, tears stinging, "but I understand what it means to love something you can't keep." She left the room before he could answer. For days, they barely spoke. Kareem threw himself into work. Layla drifted through the house like a ghost. The life growing inside her was her only anchor. Then one night she woke to find Kareem sitting beside her bed, eyes hollow. "I can't lose you," he said, voice breaking. Layla stared at him, shocked. "Then stop trying to own me." He bowed his head. "I don't know how to be any other way." It was the first time he'd admitted weakness. And in that vulnerability, something shifted again. The next morning, he called his lawyer and changed the contract. The clause about custody was gone. "You'll raise the child," he told her, "with me if you'll stay, but freely." Layla's tears came fast. "Why?" He met her gaze. "Because you taught me what love actually looks like." For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a home. Months later, Layla gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Kareem held him like he was holding the world. "Welcome," he whispered, eyes wet. Layla watched the man who once bought her now tremble under the weight of fatherhood. The moment was so pure, it made her chest ache. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Kareem balanced business and fatherhood. Layla regained her laughter. Even Ayman was brought to live with them, his joy contagious as he met his baby brother. But peace has a way of attracting storms. One day, while Kareem was abroad, the press discovered everything. Photos leaked, documents surfaced. The woman behind Al Fayed's secret family screamed the headlines. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Reporters swarmed the gates. Layla panicked. She called Kareem, but the signal was dead. Alone, trapped, and terrified for her children, she gathered what she could and hid in the nursery. The mansion became a siege. When Kareem returned 2 days later, chaos awaited him. "Who did this?" he demanded. His security chief handed him a file. "Someone inside, possibly one of your advisors." Kareem's jaw clenched. "Handle it." But even power has limits. The story had already spread beyond control. Investors withdrew, allies distanced themselves. Kareem stood before the press, shoulders squared. "I have nothing to hide. The woman you call a scandal is the mother of my child, and the reason I'm a better man." The statement shocked the world. Some applauded his courage, others condemned his defiance. Layla watched the broadcast from the mansion, tears running freely. That night he returned home exhausted. "I told the truth," he said simply. "And what happens now?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Now we live, the rest will follow." But fate wasn't finished testing them. A week later, while driving through the desert, Kareem's car was ambushed. The brakes failed. The vehicle flipped multiple times before bursting into flames. The world believed he was dead. Layla's scream echoed through the estate when she got the call. Layla collapsed to the floor, her body trembling as if the world itself had fractured beneath her. Every sound blurred, every breath came jagged. Amira rushed to her side, but the words couldn't reach through the shock. "Kareem gone?" Hours turned to days, days into weeks. The estate became a mausoleum of memories. The press moved on to new stories. Investors scavenged what remained of his empire. But Layla stayed, rooted to the only place that still carried his scent. Each night she would walk into the garden where he used to stand, watching the stars. "You said the future depends on how we handle the present," she whispered into the dark. "I'm trying, Kareem, but I don't know how to handle it without you." The baby grew fast, eyes the same deep brown as his father's. Ayman adored his little brother, and the sound of their laughter became the one thread pulling Layla through the haze of grief. Yet, deep down, something in her refused to believe he was truly gone. There had been no body, just flames and ashes, and officials eager to close the file. Months later, a letter arrived. No return address, no name, just her own written on the envelope in familiar handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. "If you're reading this, I had to disappear. There are forces that wanted me gone long before you came into my life. But I'm alive, Layla, and I'm watching over you. Protect our sons. I will find my way back when it's safe." The tears came harder this time, but they weren't just sorrow, they were a promise reignited. He was alive. From that day on, Layla lived between two worlds, the visible one where she raised her children, and the hidden one where she waited. Years passed. The mansion changed. Plants overgrew marble, laughter replaced silence, and Ayman grew into a young man protective of his mother and brother. One summer evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, the gates of the estate creaked open. A black SUV rolled in, slow and silent. Amira, now older, ran to the window. "Layla," she whispered, voice trembling, "you need to see this." Layla stepped onto the balcony, her heart hammering. A tall figure stepped out of the car, slimmer, marked by time but unmistakable. "Kareem." For a long moment the world held its breath. He lifted his gaze and met hers. The years, the distance, the pain, all of it dissolved in that single instant. She descended the stairs in disbelief, every step heavier with memory. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She just touched his face as if to confirm he was real. "I promised I'd come back," he said, voice rough. She hit his chest with trembling fists. "You vanished. You let me mourn you." He caught her hands gently. "I had to protect you. They would have hurt you to get to me." Her anger broke under the weight of relief. She fell against him, sobbing into the familiar scent she thought she'd lost forever. Kareem held her tighter than he ever had. "I never stopped thinking about you, about our boys." She pulled back, looking into his eyes, older, wiser, but still full of the same fire. "They need you," she said. "We all did." He smiled faintly. "Then I'm home." The reunion was quiet, private. The children were called in. Ayman froze at the sight of him. "Is it really you?" Kareem knelt, eyes glistening. "It's me, son. I'm sorry I was gone so long." Ayman didn't hesitate. He ran into his arms. The younger boy joined, giggling without understanding why everyone was crying. That night, for the first time in years, the mansion was filled with light again. Over dinner, Kareem recounted fragments of what had happened. The betrayal of his closest advisor, the staged accident, the months in hiding across borders. It sounded impossible, yet every word carried the weight of truth. "I lost everything that mattered except this," he said, looking around the table. "And maybe that's what it took for me to understand what real wealth is." Leela reached across, taking his hand. "You always had everything, Kareem. You just didn't see it before." He smiled, eyes soft. "You taught me that." The following months were a slow rebirth. The world eventually learned the truth. Kareem Al-Fayed had survived. But this time, he refused to return to the gilded cage of business and politics. Instead, he rebuilt quietly, dedicating himself to humanitarian work, funding orphanages and women's shelters under Layla's guidance. Every decision was different now. Every action carried meaning. At night, they would sit in the garden, the same place where it had all begun, watching the stars bloom over the desert sky. "Do you ever regret any of it?" she asked one evening. Kareem thought for a long moment. "Regret? No. Pain, yes. But every step led me here, to you, to them. If this is the price, I'd pay it again." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You really have changed." He laughed softly. "You changed me. I bought you thinking I could control fate, but fate had other plans." The wind stirred the trees, carrying the faint laughter of their children inside the house. The air felt alive again, rich with peace. Layla smiled. "Strange how life works, isn't it? The same choice that felt like the end was actually the beginning." He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes the universe disguises miracles as mistakes." She looked up at him, at the man who once bought her life and ended up giving her a new one. "Then we were one of those miracles," she said. He kissed her forehead, the rarest kind. Years later, when their sons were grown and the world had long stopped whispering their names, Layla often found herself revisiting that night of the storm, the night when everything changed. She realized then that love had not come to rescue her. It had come to challenge her, to break and rebuild both of them until they became something stronger. And in that strength she found peace. One evening, she stood in the garden again, watching Kareem teach their youngest how to ride a horse, laughter echoing across the dunes. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and smiled. Because in a world where she once had nothing, she now had everything that mattered. And she knew, deep down, that some stories don't end, they simply begin again in a softer light.